So I'll record this as well. So you are all part of an amazing organization. The more I've gotten to know about GCI from Anna and the team, et cetera, I think I would just kind of first thing start off with is one of like the stellar organizations, right? We're partnered at Elevate with about 100 organizations across the top 30 universities. So I encourage you all to get involved with the org and really build your own kind of networks as well via that, right? So let's jump in. I have a lot to cover today, but I want to keep this very interactive with everyone. So if you guys have questions, and you should absolutely sort of ask them as well. Can you guys see my screen, Anna and team? Yeah, okay, you know what? Let me move this.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, sorry, let me just move this over to my other monitor 1 second. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, now, yes? Okay, brilliant. Okay, guys, so I tend to talk a little bit fast, so if you need me slow down, just stop me, but I know we have a lot to cover today. So quick background about myself, obviously really excited to be here at Georgetown. I mentioned to Anna and the team a little bit earlier, I'm originally from the DC area, so I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland. I moved actually to the country when, from India when I was in middle school. We'll get into all that, I'm sure, later. So always kind of love coming back to DMV and sort of speaking to schools there. So my quick background, I spent the last 8+ years in private equity investment banking. So all of my career or the majority of my career has been in that space. So I started out at Goldman Sachs in our investment banking group back in 2012. And to put you guys into a little bit of my shoes back then, this is coming after the financial crisis. So we're all going through similar, dynamics right now in the industry, and we'll talk about how that affects everyone. But when I get asked this all the time, I think this is probably like, we've done about more than 100 sessions of like this at all of your peer universities. And I get asked a lot, right, from our students, what industry should I go into? Or like, what subject area should I go into? And my advice is always, what's helped me over my career is try to combine some level of interest or passion along with an industry where there's a lot going on, right? So for me, that was financial services post the financial crisis. And I think that really rewarded me early in my career. My first couple of years at Goldman, I got to work on over $100 billion of M&A and actually lead them as an associate. I'll tell you guys a little bit about how to position yourself to be in that position. But my other advice is early in your career, get a lot of transaction experience. So put yourselves in position, 1, to learn a lot, but 2, to be successful later on in your career. Right? A lot of folks go into investment banking or private equity or consulting to preserve a little bit of that optionality of what they want to do later on in their career. So one way to really do that is to build your expertise and skills and actually experience via deals. So I spent a few years at Goldman, first in an investment bank. Like I said, got a ton of deal experience my first couple of years. Then, as a lot of folks do, I transitioned to private equity. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of exit options and so on and so forth. The environment is rapidly changing where now we have a lot of private equity roles at the undergraduate level as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of those things, as well as 2 to 3 years out. I joined Goldman's own private equity group, which is a $100 billion fund. So think of it like a mega fund within GS. As an associate, made vice president in a year. There I led our transactions in financial services, financial institutions, technology, fintech, et cetera. Obviously that market has done really, really well. And that's done, the investments have done really well, right? So I think that's big. And then when sort of still in my mid to late 20s, I got the opportunity to join another fund as a director. So I'll talk a little bit about how do you accelerate yourself early on in your career in your 20s and make sure you're in a position to do that, right? So we'll come back to some of those topics. The second thing I want to highlight is we may not get to all the transaction experiences on this call since this is a little bit more recruiting specific, the session is, but been able to work on over $200 billion of deals to date. And those are across, right, buy side, sell sides, M&A, IPOs, split offs, spin offs, restructurings, et cetera. And I think it is very important, like I said earlier, about getting not just size of deals, but depth and kind of breadth of deals in your career as you sort of embark upon it. One other thing I highlight, which kind of what led me to also start to Elevate, was at Goldman, I also took on a bunch of leadership roles, and I encourage you all, right, whether it's GCI or other things you're involved in, or when you go and embark, upon your careers and you join these great firms, et cetera, to try to take on additional sort of leadership and development roles for a couple of reasons, right? One is it builds your own managerial ability, because banking and private equity, it's not like you have a ton of people to oversee, right? So the one way to really build your leadership skills is taking on a lot of these development roles. Number two, it extremely fastly increases your profile and reputation within the firm. And so some of the leadership roles for me was I was asked to be chief of staff within an investment banking group in FIG, also to be recruiting lead, and also to sort of be on the promotion committee and the summer committee. So all of these different roles, I think, shaped me a lot into doing a lot of the initiatives around people development, leadership, et cetera. Again, we'll get to that all in a second. So that leads me to sort of our partnership with Gci and Georgetown. In addition to private equity, I actually started Elevate in 2019. Now it's been a little over 2 years, to sort of build something that I didn't have growing up in the industry, right? Again, I'm just the last 5 to 6 years that I've really noticed, can we build a best-in-class networking, learning, recruiting, and investing platform for professionals and students who are pursuing careers in private equity, investment banking, growth equity, venture capital, hedge funds, et cetera. So we've gone about and we've actually done that. And can we do it that's 100% built by professionals, right? So what's really missing is sort of, there isn't as much sort of guidance, I think, in all these careers. There's a lot of black box, but also not just in undergrad, post undergrad, when you guys go into the industry, and then post that, maybe you go to business school. So there's, at every juncture in your career, we want to simplify people's career journeys, right? So that's the goal. Like we mentioned, I'll get to this in a second. We're partnered with most of the top, firms and professionals in various capacities on Elevate, which has been really awesome. And then we're also partnered with sort of 100 organizations like yourselves across both the undergrad and the top level MBA. So I'll get to that in a second. So this is just an example of the different groups that we are partnered with at the undergrad level, and then example of sort of, this is just a sample set, but there's probably over 100 firms and professionals that we've had on the platform. I'll share kind of how you get access to some of these things. Like this Friday, we're having on TPG, an investor from there. So if anyone's interested in private equity or growth equity, you can check that out. And I'll get to all that in a second. These are just examples of events. Again, we will share through Anna all the events that are happening, and I think she will get it out to everyone. I do want to spend a minute. One resource I think you all should highly check out. I spoke about this at Harvard last night, and we were at Michigan 2 nights ago, and people just absolutely loved it, is this thing, which is the Academy. I will just point you to it in a second. This is basically like 500 videos. You can just go in. Let's say you're interested. I'm just going to pick my old firm, right? Goldman. And you could just want to get videos. We have, let's say, 21 pages. So close to 100 videos just from people in there. All the questions you might have, right? Exit options from investment banking, or how to prepare for informational interviews. What is the best thing about whatever? So you can just go through this and figure out any questions you possibly have about work or careers. I guarantee you'll have 4 or 5 perspectives from different people who work at these firms. So again, happy to share that with GCI as a partner club. Do with it as you will, but kind of that's sort of what I'd say. So let's sort of jump in. Anna, did you have any? I have a bunch of slides that we usually go through. Did you want to start off with anything from your end?
No, all you.
Okay, great. So I will do this. Let me do a couple other things. So here's where you can find a lot of these resources. You can check that out. Again, here's LinkedIn, and here's the, I'll share the TPG thing a little bit later. But let's keep moving. So there's sort of 7 sections, the way I've sort of organized this. Again, we're not going to maybe not get to everything, today, just given how these things go, but we'll try to get to as many as possible. So the first area I like to start out with everyone here, but feel free to raise your hands, right? If you want me to stop or pause or whatever. The first question I get asked, right? I think the vast majority of the students in here are either first, second, or third year. So, you're really still in the journey of figuring out what you want to do with your careers. So I like to break down sort of what are the 5 main areas that, that basically within Elevate, right? We see tens of thousands of students like yourself across all these universities. So what are the 5 most common pathways that we found, right? The first one is investment banking. Again, what is investment banking for those people that are new? I think all of our sophomores are starting going through the process right now. So it's a good idea to sort of brush up on what investment banking is, but effectively it's an advisory role, right? So you're hired. So when, as at Goldman Sachs, we'd hire us, the board of a company or the CEO or whoever would hire us to provide them with advice and transaction execution for a set of transactions. So it could be for growth strategy, it could be for raising capital, it could be for M&A, which is buying or selling companies, it could be for divestitures, it could be for bankruptcy, liquidation. There's sort of a whole host of potential options that a company can undertake as it relates to strategic and financial transactions. And so they hire an investment bank to advise them on that. What that means for you all as an analyst or an associate at the junior level, you're working on a multitude of sort of complex transactions and deals, as we like to call them, or transactions, where call it, if you are hired by, Amazon, right, to advise on the Whole Foods acquisition. So you're advising Amazon on what price they should pay. What is the synergies that they can get, right? What are the strategic benefits? How do they raise financing for that deal? Do they do equity or do they do debt? How much debt would it do? What is the impact on the stock price? What is the impact on the valuation? So all of those things that the company wants you to do from a corporate finance perspective, you are in charge of. Similarly, like I worked on the largest IPO since Facebook. And what we were doing is literally leading the company from step one, when they were a private company, all the way to taking them to the NASDAQ and sort of ringing the bell, right? So everything that goes into the IPO process, we're advising the company on. And I was working directly with the CFO to do that, right? So that's the kind of access, right, these careers give you at a junior level. As far as skill sets, you're building a deep financial skill set. There's a little bit less of an operational focus. And look, over your career, you're going to have to build these things. You're going to have to build a financial skill set. You're going to have to build an operational skill set. You're going to have to build a strategic skill set. So it's up to you on how you want to sort of dimension all these things and where you build all these different skill sets. As you progress in investment banking, you develop more client relationships and it becomes more about strategy and execution. Again, we'll come back to this. By the way, on the right is just some examples of firms who we've had on Elevate. If you want to learn more about these careers, you can obviously go to the platform and sort of figure that out. Second thing, private investing. I would say about 30% of the Elevate audience. So I'd say about 40% of our audience goes into investment banking. About 30% of our audience across all of these, 34, 35 universities goes into private investing. So this is either private equity or private credit. Again, let's not worry about private equity versus private credit right now, but I think just generally in private investing, you are not an advisor, right? In banking, you're an advisor. In private equity or private credit, you are an investor. So what that sort of means is your crux of the job is you're investing as an owner, right? So let's say you go work at a Blackstone or a TPG or any of these firms, you are doing all the analysis to basically like, you're doing all the analysis to make a decision on whether you want to invest in that company. Again, if folks have questions on this, we'll get to this in a second. Growth equity, venture capital. Again, this is earlier stage investing. So let's say you are sort of in still, in sort of the growth stage of a company. Here's where you invest. Again, these are earlier rounds. So Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. And it's usually non-majority stakes in a company. Again, if folks have questions on growth equity, venture capital, we can get into that. Public investing is another big area people go into. I'd say about 15 to 20% of Elevate goes into this. This is sort of the hedge fund world or other types of investing in public securities. The difference between this and private, obviously, is that the companies are public. And then finally, consulting, strategy, corporate, this is sort of the consulting firms or sort of corporate strategy. And here it's less finance focused and more strategy and operational focused. Again, a lot of this depends on what are you interested in, right? So Anna, if you came to me and you're like, hey, what career should I go into? I'm going to ask you, what are you interested in, right? Are you interested in strategy, operations, financial transactions, investing, public equities, right? So a lot of this career journey, folks, sort of demystification, step one is to understand, like, what are you interested in? What really drives you? And then sort of go from there. Okay, so we'll come back to that topic in a second. So the second question I get asked is, all right, so what should I be doing? All right, I get it, I got these careers. So what should I be doing now that I sort of have a better understanding? So I'll just break this down to kind of first year, second years, and upperclassmen. You can sort of ignore the right of this page. It's sort of more relevant for my MBAs and bankers. So if you're first year, I know we have a few first years on this call. Number one is career exploration and self-exploration. You've just sort of now, it's just been 6 to 8 months on campus. So now you've sort of gotten a footing. Now let's start getting involved in these organizations. Let's start understanding for yourself, what are all these careers about? And what am I all about? What do I like doing? What are my own interests? What are my passions, et cetera? Because as you guys know, I'll get to my second years in a second, recruiting happens like this, right? So it literally happens your second year. So you have to be in a position to be ready to recruit for a job post undergrad, a year and a half into your undergrad career. So it's sort of a lot, and the time pressures are there, right? So that's number one. So exploration. Number two, strong performance at universities. Having sat on the recruiting team for multiple years, both across banking and PE, we have cutoffs, right? So your goal should be to make the minimum sort of GPA thresholds, and that will automatically, get you into these interviews or into the resume book versus having to explain sort of, sub 3.5 GPA, for instance, right? So just kind of doing well in school is just really important. And then number 3, on-campus involvement. The number one thing that differentiates people, the 2 things that differentiate people when it gets to the sophomore year, number 1 is on-campus involvement. So board positions or analyst positions or leadership positions in different clubs, or relevant work experience. So having that sort of work experience, those 2 things differentiate people, right? When we see all these resumes that all look the same. As a second year, I would focus on starting to build your network with professionals. Obviously, everyone who's going through the recruiting process right now, you better be doing that already, but we'll get into kind of how to do that and do that well. But that's a huge emphasis on going into these careers, especially in investment banking or private equity and consulting to a lesser extent. Second is deeper career exploration. I think you've just done an internship over your freshman year. So now you can think about, all right, how do I use that to know kind of what I want to do for full-time, or these clubs that I'm part of, GCI, how do I use that to get to know what I'm really interested in afterwards? And then obviously recruiting and interviewing, right? All of your recruiting and most of your recruiting and interviewing is going to happen from sort of the March, April, May timeframe all the way to sort of September, October, right? So being ready and prepared for that, we'll get to some of those strategies. Look, upperclassmen, we can talk about later, but I think generally upperclassmen, I would say, just getting more kind of being able to get yourself in a position to do well in your job. That's sort of the goal as an upperclassman. Again, we get into that a little bit later. Okay, let's keep moving. All right, recruiting. So there's sort of 5 pieces to recruiting I want to hit on. The sort of people, then the next question is, all right, I'm interested in investment banking or I'm interested in private equity. How do I sort of think about the recruiting process? And a lot of you have started going through this, right? The diversity process have started. Some of the investment banks have started. Some of the private equity firms are already dropping their their deadlines. So to me, it's 5 things, right? How to be successful in the process. Number 1, university. That's part of it. You obviously can't change because you're an awesome university at Georgetown, but how do you leverage that platform to get yourself in a good position to be successful in these processes? So most universities, most banks have university-specific recruiting teams. I'd say Georgetown is probably a target at about 50 to 60% of the investment banks on Wall Street, maybe a little bit, I'd say about 60%. So for those banks that come on campus, your goal is to network and build relationships with the recruiting teams that are Georgetown specific. For the banks that don't come on campus, your job is to go find people there that are either Georgetown focused or part of the recruiting team, and then get into that process. Again, we'll get to that, how to do that in just a second. The second key, I mentioned this earlier, is academic performance. So, hugely important in terms of when people just look at your resume, they want to know, all right, what's your major? What's your GPA? What's your SAT score, right? I think obviously going to Georgetown is a huge positive sign because it's a very selective school. But let's say your kind of your GPA is X or your major is this, you're going to have to sort of explain some of those things in the interview. Number 3, internship experience resume building. Again, as you're going through the sophomore process, especially as you get closer and closer to the summer, more emphasis is going to be placed on where are you going to be interning your sophomore year summer. I know a lot of you probably don't have internships yet for your sophomore year summer. So your task number 1 is to get that internship, regardless of what industry or whatever. Try to sort of get that nailed down as you go through the recruiting process for junior year internships. For our first years, I think your goal should just be to get an internship, right? It could be in business, it could be in technology, it could be in whatever, and then use that to sort of build the bridge to why you may want to do these careers later on. Again, reserve the right to change your mind. Just because you're in GCI doesn't mean you have to go into investing careers, right? If you absolutely don't like it or you find some other passion, absolutely take that option and go find something else. But use these experiences to sort of build that. Fourth is networking. Again, this is probably the most critical piece of the whole process. You can overcome a lot of holes in your resume or your background by networking effectively, and you could not open yourself up to as many possibilities by not networking effectively. So you should really, really master this art of networking that we're talking about, especially for investment banking. Look, I'll get to networking on a separate slide a little bit later, but the key is to build relationships with a lot of these firms and professionals over the course of the next couple months, such that someone on the Georgetown recruiting team or someone at that X, Y, and Z bank recruiting team will then say, hey, I've talked to Anna. I think she's awesome. we should include her in the process, okay? Or that's sort of where you need to be or where you want to get, right? Because think about it from the other side. I'll just give an example at Goldman, like we would get 300, 400 resumes from a single university, right? So I was doing U Chicago and I was doing undergrad and also MBA recruiting and sort of leading those teams. And we would see that many resumes. And so we were asked to get from 300 down to, 50 for an interview. Like that's impossible, right? Unless we know people on the recruiting team, unless people have differentiated themselves, unless sort of there's things that stand out about people, right? So that's why networking becomes important. And then finally, interviewing. Again, this is sort of comes later, but my focus with you all should be, my recommendation is you all should focus on the behavioral piece more than the technical piece, because behavioral sort of is where it sort of makes or breaks it. Again, we'll get to that in a second. And then one other thing I'll hit on before I sort of take some more questions, I suppose. By the way, raise your hands if you guys have questions. Yeah, feel free to raise your hands and sort of ask them. I think it'd be cool if you could ask live. So what are firms looking for? I'm just going to do this very quickly. There's a lot that went into this. I think we probably surveyed something like 100 current people on the recruitment team at different banks. And our summary came out to this, right? And we're looking for this in the combination of, all of your different experiences. So either via your resume, either via your networking calls, your interviews themselves, all of these factors that go into this. Number one is analytical ability. Again, I'll go into this at a high level, but I will not go into this in kind of the minutia. But can you prove to us that you've had experience or can handle sort of analytical complex problems? To think about these careers, right? Whether it's banking, consulting, or private equity, or venture capital, or hedge funds, is all of these careers there's no like answer key, right? It's not like school when you do a problem set and there's an answer key. Most of the time, the models you're building or the presentations you're doing don't have any precedent, or maybe they have a precedent, but you're building it on own, right? So can you solve these problems on your own and figure this out without a lot of guidance, right? That's the type of analyst that we're recruiting for. The second, key is technical quantitative exposure. Again, the way you can exhibit that is by saying, hey, I interned at X, Y, and Z firm, or I interned here, or I did this project at school, I'm part of GCI, or I did this major, or whatever. But you should use your experiences to convince us that you can handle the technical quantitative nature of the job. Teamwork, obviously very important. I think this was the number one thing, at most of the firms on the recruitment side that I've seen. Leadership, drive, initiative. Again, it doesn't have to be a finance thing, but it should be something, right? It could be that you were an athlete, or it could be that you were a musician, or you were whatever, but what drives this candidate to be successful? Character, again, we'll get into this. We asked a lot of failure, weakness questions, so you should be ready for those and really, address those well. Interest in finance. Look, at the end of the day, this is a job, right? Whether it's PE or banking or venture capital, there's sort of a financial component to it. So can you tell us why finance, or why banking, or why PE? Again, it could be many reasons, right? But you have to sort of make that case of why the industry. Interest in markets. Higher views, or some of these interviews often ask, there's a question that says, hey, what do you think of inflation right now? Or what do you think are the most important trends in the market? So I want you guys to be following the markets, right? Go sign up for DealBook, or go sign up for the Financial Times or the Journal, Wall Street Journal, and then read the news like 10 minutes a day. That will help you come interview time, speak about things that are happening in the industry. Curiosity about business, communication skills. All right, that's all well and good. Let me pause here. We have a section on resume building, networking, and then interviews. But before we jump into all this, let me sort of take a minute to take any questions, or pause for a minute, take questions. And while people are mobilizing around that, couple of you guys asked me about this TPG event, this office hours thing on Friday. That's the link to it. So Anthony, someone asked, will you share the slide with us? Yeah, I mean, would it be helpful, Anna, to share this out with everyone?
Yeah, that would be great. And then we'll send it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to do it. No problem. Yeah, we can do that after the session. And we're recording this as well. So our team will take probably a couple of days to process it, but we can share that as well. Ben, what's up?
How's it going? I just wanted to first say thank you for speaking tonight. So I'm actually a junior, and I'm going to be working in capital markets this summer. I was just wondering, so I want to work at PE sometime down the line. And I was just wondering, like, what you recommend for me to make that pivot and transition, after a couple of years?
Yeah. Okay. So honest answer, I would do a good job this summer. Look, nothing, like everything is possible. I think I always say to our students, and look, anything I tell you is not like me just like hyping you guys up. It's sort of like, I've done this for like tens and 20,000s of students. So it's not like I've seen all these different cases. So my summary from that is like, anything is possible. Okay. So I just want to say that at the beginning. So if you sort of have a mindset, it's possible. The only question is it going to happen 2 years from now, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, right? So if there's a goal in mind, right, we all have the ability to do it. The challenge in these careers is oftentimes it's very linear, right? So if you kind of, your options and sometimes are limited or more expansive based on what you've worked before, which is why there's a lot of emphasis on sort of going to the right sort of places out of undergrad or for the summer or whatever, because these careers just tend to be a little more linear. That said, there's plenty of cases of people who've been tremendously successful in private equity venture capital because they were relentless. They were sort of didn't take no for an answer, and they were sort of able to overcome that. So what I'm telling you is have a plan, which I'm going to describe to you in a second. And if that doesn't happen, don't relent. You can still keep trying, and I think you'll definitely get there. But my general point on capital markets is obviously do a really good job. Look, without you can message me on LinkedIn afterwards if you have follow-up questions that are more specific to your case. But my view is for you guys is try to sort of leverage, you're junior, so try to see if you can leverage that capital markets experience to go into sort of more of a classic investment banking or private equity thing right out of college, right? So you're gonna have to network like really hard. You're gonna have to sort of go back into the recruiting. I mean, see if there's an option at your own firm, right? Assuming you do well and get a return offer to do that. Again, you could still stay in capital markets, and especially if you go to LevFin or things like that, you can make the transition to private equity a year or two in. But I would try to see if you can sort of transition that into an IB classic role or an M&A or an industry group, even if it means go to a different bank for your full time, and that will certainly open up more options for the on-cycle or off-cycle recruiting process. Okay, not that capital markets shuts you off to anything or anything like that. It's just going to be a little bit more work. So is that helpful, Ben, for that topic?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sure. Sachi.
Hi, Kaushik. Thank you for the presentation. I'm a sophomore right now, and I'm wondering that you said sophomore internship, like the summer internship, super important. I was wondering like how crucial that is. Like if you have a justification for like why you want to do something else with your summer, is that like okay, or do you think that an internship is the best way to go?
Okay, can you just give me like, oh, by the way, sorry, one thing I'll say, Anna, is that on the slides, if you guys didn't register for this event online, I don't have your email to send you the slides. So make sure if you haven't, register for the event. Someone just reminded me of this. So let me just point you to the thing. It's 1 second, Sachi, I'll get your question, but someone just remind me, so I'm just gonna give you guys. So here's the link. Again, it's up to you, I guess, like if you want to do it now or later, but I think here's the link to the event. And again, you can register for that, or if you register for the TPG event, you will probably get access as well. But yeah, so Sachi, can you give me a little bit more specificity on what you mean by something else, or like, what is your career like goal?
Well, I would say like right now I'm kind of in the recruiting process. I like say like going to different events, like networking. And so I was wondering if like, for example, this summer I want to study abroad or spend time doing something like locally or like doing another type of job, but I have like a reason for it. Would you say that I should also be thinking about maybe just doing an internship instead, because that's that crucial to getting a job, for me being able to like talk about it when that time comes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And I almost want to thank you for sort of asking that, because I think a lot of people feel this pressure to sort of get on the train or sort of get left behind at the station type of mentality. Look, I think it's a good question. Look, I think every decision sort of has a trade-off, no? And sort of in your life and in your career. By no means, my first thing would be, absolutely, you should pursue your passions, your interests, because college is also a short time, right? You have 4 years. With COVID, it's been reduced to an extent. And then you sort of have only X summers to do the things that you want. All that said, there is a huge premium, especially your second year, to get an internship of some sort. But that's only my point. What I guess my point in saying that is that it sort of works in transverse, right? So you have all these people applying, and everyone from Georgetown is great on paper, right? Everyone has great GPAs, everyone has great majors, everyone's part of great clubs, whatever. So what are the things that we can use to differentiate people, right? So number one is networking, right? So if Sachi, you made a huge impression on all the people on the recruiting team by just kind of going out to them, then great, then we'll probably put in the process. But the one thing we'll kind of want to know is you'll sort of be competing with other people who are going to have other relevant internships for private equity and investment banking. And that's just a reality. So if you can come out and say, hey, there's this project that I was super excited about, and I'm like, this was the opportunity that I didn't want to turn down for X, Y, and Z reason, sure, that could hold water. And I think people would believe you, but you just kind of have to compare and contrast that against someone else who may have a more relevant experience, right? So just from just a high level perspective. The second point around that would be that you just have to sort of convince someone, right? Like, you can try to convince me later, but you kind of have to convince someone that whatever you're doing as an opportunity, other than this, like study abroad is a little bit like, I'll be honest, I don't think it's as impactful as an internship, right? Just from on the recruiting side. I think it's great for a personal development, whatever maturity, all that stuff. But from an internship side, it's not as strong. But this other opportunity you're talking about, I'm not really sure what it is, but I'm sure it's great. So you just have to sort of understand the trade-off going in. The thing is, you will also be recruiting for your junior year internship, most likely between now and the summer. So the reason why it's just important to have something on paper is because you just want to show the company that, hey, this is kind of thought ahead and I have an internship this summer. Again, not having an internship for your sophomore summer isn't the end of the world. It's just try to make an concerted effort to try to get an internship for the summer as you're recruiting for the junior role as well. So Sachi, I hope that was like kind of at a high level helpful. If you have more specific questions on your own story, like you can definitely message me on LinkedIn. And in fact, I suppose any of you guys can, I'll try to get back to it. But Sachi, is that at least helpful at a high surface level?
Yeah, no, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think generally I got to ask a lot of questions about masters and, summers and all that stuff in the real world, like on the other side, while they're very important for you all, from a development side, they're not as impactful as having an internship somewhere, right? That's sort of how the real, I guess, in recruiting works, whether, it's sort of unfortunate, I suppose, but that's sort of how it works. So, okay, Sachi, you can reach out if on any, I guess I put my LinkedIn up if others want to do it as well, but yeah, feel free to sort of follow-ups. But yeah, Anna, you're up. What's up?
Yeah, this is a question on behalf of the juniors that have an investment banking internship this summer. What preparation do you suggest, like in the coming months, coming weeks before your internship, or should you just kind of trust the company's training and go in kind of blindly?
Okay, great question. So I will say a couple of things on this. One is lucky for you guys, every year, this year I think we're going to do it twice because it's always so popular on Elevate. We'll have on sort of 10 to 15 people who are all of the different firms, right? Like Goldman, Morgan, JP Morgan, Centerview, Lazard, all the firms last summer. And they're going to come on and tell you guys, especially our juniors, how to be successful this summer. So we're going to have a dedicated session to that. We usually get like 300-400 people to show up from all of our schools. So definitely you can come to that and ask them all the questions on, how should you strategy your analyst, or how should you what are the things you want to work on and all that stuff. So we'll probably do that in April, end of April, May. So it gives you enough time to sort of prepare. Sort of two or three other things in the meantime you should do. Number one, if you're going to a industry specific group, now is the time to start subscribing to TechCrunch or, Consumer Retail Daily or, whatever the 3 or 4 or 5, industry specific publications or whatever are, so that you start reading about these things and really getting familiar with what's going on. Number 2, subscribe to the deal book. And so you'll know every day sort of what's happening in the markets, right? So the number one sort of reason why a lot of people get off to a slow start is because they're not fully sort of up to speed on markets or industries or M&A and so on and so forth. So that would be sort of my first word, advice. Number two is if you're okay, so if you're going to a generalist program, it's a little bit harder, right? So if you're going to more of a generalist program, I would sort of just try to cover the M&A news that's going on. Maybe Bloomberg that does a great job. So just kind of getting up to speed on that. Number two, I would just sort of see if you can, kind of just brush up on some of these, modeling or sort of some of these resources you guys probably already have, or some of the stuff that we have on Elevate, but just kind of brush up on sort of, well, how does an M&A deal work, or how does an IPO work, or et cetera. And so this is more on the vocabulary, right, that you sort of need to get into. On the training at the firm, look, the training with the firm at a 10-week internship is 4 days. Okay, there's just, and I've ran that training at Goldman, and it's like, it's really not enough to get you what you need to do on the thing. The nice thing for you guys is that like the job starts off like pretty even paced, and then it picks up a lot. So a lot of the work that you'll need to do is going to be around, some of the logistics stuff for the teams, just understanding what's going on the first couple of weeks before you're asked to do anything super, like high powered. And the last thing is sort of, I wouldn't stress too much about it, Anna. Like if you're doing the first two things, I think you'll go ahead, and just as long as you have a good attitude and sort of do the things you're sort of asked and check your work and some of those things, I think you'll be fine. So again, we'll do a dedicated session on this, Anna, in a month or two or whatever. And I'm happy to share with you some of the IB specific stuff, Anna, after the call, and you guys can figure out how you want to disseminate it. But there's some stuff that I can point you to as well for the summer preparation. Cool, awesome. So okay, I think there's a couple more questions. So Steven.
Yeah, thanks again. So my question is for people currently going through recruiting, how do you recommend, or would you even recommend, narrowing down the scope of types of firms that you want to focus your recruiting efforts on? So if this is like, if you want to focus more on like bulge bracket or like boutiques or middle market or things like that, how would you recommend going about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So this is sort of IB specific, right? A couple of things I'd say. I think it might help so how the recruiting process works in the next couple months. The first 2 months is going to be a lot of the boutique banks, right? So your Evercore, Lazards, and so on, Houlihan's, et cetera, are going to come out and sort of recruiting. So I would almost start your networking with those banks. And how to start your networking there is you should go out to Georgetown alums, maybe first year analyst, second year analyst, third year, first year associate, second year associate. So Georgetown it's not a huge alumni network like some of our other schools, but it's a very strong alumni network where I think people want to help other people out because they've sort of been in your shoes. So number one, I get very, very organized around your networking. So make a spreadsheet, Google Sheets, or whatever you want, and just start tracking bank by bank and start pumping out these emails. We didn't get to the networking section yet, but basically what I want everyone here to do, if you're going through sophomore recruiting right now, don't start off by being very narrow. Start off by being broad, right? I think it's fine for the next month or so to sort of reach out to, every week, I want you all to be reaching out to like 5 to 6 bankers at each firm every week. Okay, I know that sounds like a lot. In fact, maybe even more than that, right? So just start reaching out to them and say, hey, I'm Steven. I'm part of Gci at Georgetown. I'm going through the investment banking process right now. I'm really interested in investment banking. This is what I did last summer. This is what I'm doing at Georgetown. I noticed you were at X, Y, and Z. As I've learned more about, investment banking, this is a firm I, really want to learn more about. So if you had 10 minutes, I'd love to get on the phone, right? Something like that sort of introduces yourself, introduces your interest in the firm, and then connect with that person individually. And then let's start connecting. Let's see, if you email 100 people, folks, you'll get responses from 30, right? If you're lucky, right? 30 to 35. And of those, you'll probably have Zooms with like 15, right? So, and then of those, you'll have sort of 5 of those will get rescheduled. So you start with 100, you end up with 8 to 10 Zooms, right? That's not a lot. So this is why I want you to sort of work the numbers. To Steven's question though, like the process will distill itself down, right? There's going to be certain banks where you have no Georgetown alums. So you're going to have to be really, really creative, right? You're going to have to go find people who either are connections of connections. I mean, come on to some of these Elevate events and then email some of our bankers afterwards saying, hey, I heard you at X, Y, and Z event. Do you mind if I connect? And I'm not going to speak for them, but I think your hit rate will be a lot higher in those type of situations because they're warm connections, right? So I think my point is find whatever way you need to get in front of these people and really try to maximize your hit rate, right? That's the end goal here. And then you get to Steven's point where this process will distill itself down, right? Just because you email 10 banks you're going to get traction at 2, 3, 4 max. You know what I mean? That's how this thing works. And that let the process distill itself for you, right? So don't put a lot of, pressure on yourself initially to try to figure this out, but sort of be relentless in a sense, right? Be professional, but sort of, be relentless in that if someone doesn't email you back, follow up with them once or twice, and say, hey, like, I'm sure you're really busy, but I'd love 5 minutes of your time. But if they don't respond after, once or twice, then obviously stop and go to someone else. But, and then when you do have these meetings, like take notes, follow up with them and say, hey, Steven, I had a great call. Or Steven will say, hey, Kaushik, I had a great call with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciated your advice around, around sort of, interning at X, Y, and Z over the summer and doing this. I'll be sure to, keep that in mind. And if you don't mind, I'll keep you, updated on how my recruiting is going, right? So that's all you need to say in that email. So you can kind of give yourself the opportunity to follow up with those people as the process goes. There's multiple benefits to this. We're not gonna have time to go through all this, but guess what? If you go intern somewhere next summer and you don't like it, or you need to go somewhere else, anyone who you networked with this year, you can go back to next year and say, hey, we met last year, part of recruiting. I interned at Lazard, I think that, boutique bank is okay, but I'm really looking for a bulge bracket. So I'd love to have this conversation. So these are sort of like warm connections that you can really take advantage of. And so Steven, to your point, the bulge brackets will probably start, other than diversity, will start sort of end of March, April, May. So, I would suggest at that point, you kind of pivot over there. But I think even now, just go broad, start with the elite boutiques, but also go through all the bulge brackets. And this process is pretty quick. Like if you email someone today, you may not have a Zoom with them 3 weeks from now, so I think you just have to be cognizant that this stuff takes a while. And that's kind of what I want you to be cognizant of. So Steven, does that help answer your question? Okay, cool. 1 second. I know there's other questions. I just want to go through the slides and see how we're doing. Okay, so let's just go through, okay, I know there's a couple more questions. Richie and Arif, I will take your questions in just 2 minutes. Let me just go through a couple more slides just because I want to get through them. I think, where were we? Networking, I sort of hit on networking already. Again, principles are, it helps advance your candidacy. Outreach, for anyone, by the way, who's looking for a sophomore year internship, just like, the easiest place to start is see where your juniors and seniors interned and just apply to those firms, because you already know that they're taking interns for their sophomore year, right? So sort of, if Anna works somewhere and, you're like, okay, cool, I want to get a sophomore internship, reach out to Anna and say, hey, how'd you get this internship? Can you this is what I want to do? Or, just email the firm. You already know where they're, recruiting, right? So try to make these things easier. Obviously you can leverage sort of the Elevate stuff as well. I get a lot of questions around email communications. Again, figure out what works for you, but be proactive, sort of be active. Just say, hey, I know you're busy, but I'd love 10 minutes of your time. Hey, I saw you did this. This is what I've done. Can you help me out here, right? So just sort of give them a reason to email you back. Okay, so that's my sort of point on communication. And then the actual meeting, be prepared, sort of be ready to sort of answer some of these questions. Again, we can get into that if folks have questions. Interviews themselves, again, I'm going to send the slides out. So I know some of you guys, we're just not going to get to these topics right now, but generally behavioral, the most important thing is 2 things. One is nail your pitch. Okay. So you have 90 seconds to say, hey, I'm Anna, I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm this at GCI. I did this last summer. I'm really interested in investment banking for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I'm interested in, your firm for these reasons and da. So sort of put it up front, credentialize yourself, make your pitch. That really sets a tone, right, for either informationals or your actual interviews. The other things, again, I don't have time to go through all of these questions with everyone, but a lot of the questions you get asked is sort of strengths, weaknesses, proud of accomplishments, failures, conflicts on teams, complex situations, da. So my general view, you don't know what questions you're going to get, but what you can do is come in prepared with 5 or 6 really, really good stories that could apply for multiple of these sort of situations and sort of set it up that way. Again, if folks have questions on interviews, we can go to that in a second. Technical, I'm not going to go in through as much here. We might do more technical stuff on the Elevate platform in a month or so. But again, there's like a PDF that gets circulated around. Again, it's not it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty easy. And I'd say technicals are not the most important part of an interview, right? Other than maybe one bank, they're sort of not the most important part of the interview. So don't kill yourself. I think what's more important than even technicals is this point around what are you tracking in the market? So really, really be able to answer those questions. These are some perspectives from higher views. I don't think we'll have time to go into this right now. We have more technical things here, which again, we may not get into here. Private equity, I think all I'm going to touch on in private equity, I'm going to share this with you guys. I want to give you guys a framework for how you think about buy-side recruiting whenever you guys do it. Again, we're not going to have time to do this today, unfortunately. It looks like on timing, but I might come back to this if folks have questions around this, but really important. I think there's 5 things you all need to think about, which is public-private, stage of investing, size of investing, emphasis on the role, right? Which is more sourcing or transaction or portfolio heavy or fundraising heavy, geography, industries, etc. Private equity careers, I think a lot of you are still in the investment banking phase, so we may skip this now. Private equity, LBO. Okay, so let's pause on all this stuff. Let me take the questions, and then if we have time, we can go back to some of these topics. Okay, cool. One thing I will ask, and I asked Anna to send this around as well, but if you guys, my team has asked all of our universities when we go to sort of, if you guys found this helpful, to do a quick like 10-second testimonial that, hey, I took this at Georgetown, and give it like a 5-star or whatever on this link. Takes 10 seconds, just help us do it. And then it'll help us obviously in the long run. But just the link here, I think Anna will follow up with you guys as well. But if you just click now, it takes 10 seconds. But okay, let's go through these questions. Richie, what's up?
First of all, thank you so much for coming on. This has been really informative. But I'm a sophomore and I'm interning for an investment bank this upcoming summer, and I'm going through some of the recruiting stuff as well for junior summer. And one of the questions that I have is kind of how do you effectively do a networking call with some of these people at like bulge brackets? I know they usually have like very little time to talk to you, and often they're stressed out and stuff. What are those main questions that you want to hit upon? And another thing that I feel like that they often ask me is like, why this specific bank, as opposed to like, if you're talking to someone at Goldman, why not JP Morgan? They do so like, they're so similar. Like, what do they want to hear for that kind of thing as well?
I'm on mute. So the first question around, well, how do you do these networking sessions? Have you had networking sessions yet? And how are they going?
Good. I mean, I've just been reaching out, like you said, to Georgetown alums and talking to them and stuff. But how do you think you can most effectively, like, what questions do you want to harp on? Like at Goldman, I talked to a guy, he's like, you have 5 minutes. Like, what do you want to ask?
Okay. Yeah. So like, look, I think the goal from any networking session, whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, should be 3 things. One is make sure you make a poignant intro, right? Richie, your intro was actually pretty good that we started. Again, I could give you some tips later, but I think your intro was good in the sense that you're like, hey, I'm a sophomore, I'm part of GCI, I'm interning at this investment bank, and I'm interested in investment banking for X, Y, and Z reasons. That's it. And then I would sort of ask them, depending on sort of the bank and sort of your process, I would sort of ask them, hey, again, if it's a 15 to 20 minute session, Richie, I think I would sort of focus on, hey, tell me about sort of your experience, here this summer and full time. They'll probably take a minute or two to answer that. And then say number 2, like, hey, I'm really interested in sort of X, Y, and Z, this industry. And if they're working in that industry, maybe talk to them a little bit about how they think about coverage or how they think about X, Y, and Z. And then you can then go to sort of say, hey, what are the tips you'd give someone like me going through the recruiting process? I'm kind of making my ways here. Are there other, things I should be doing, or, people I should talk to? Again, if you only have 5 minutes, it should be sort of 1 on yourself, 1 on them, 1 on the firm, and then 1 on what you could be doing in the process. Okay. But if you have a longer time, like maybe 15 minutes to do something, I think eventually, right, you can have a set of questions, which again are those same topics, right? About myself, about the firm, about their own career. And they will probably spend a lot of time on some of the deals that they worked on or things that, that they've been seeing. The key that I would want you guys to do is, yes, you'll have your set of questions going in, but be engaged in what they're saying and ask follow-up questions to that, right? The biggest mistake I see people do is they have their set of questions that they go through, and then they're like robotic about it, right? They don't even respond to what the person is saying. And I say, hey, I just worked on this cool IPO, it was really sort of interesting pricing deal in this, SaaS technology space. And then the person goes, oh, okay, then tell me about how the summer internship program looks like. And then you're like, well, don't you have any follow-ups about what I just said? So try to be engaged in sort of the conversation, even if you don't get to all of your questions. But generally, Richie, if you're only given like 5-10 minutes, which is where all these things are heading, again, credentialize yourself, ask them about their experience so far, kind of what they found really exciting about that group. I mean, a great question to ask is, all right, how is the GSTMT or GSFIG group structured, across different industry groups, and sort of what area do you focus on and how do you find that, right? So that's a good kind of question to get your feet wet around the firm specific question. You're learning about something, you're demonstrating your interest in that firm, and you're learning something about themselves, right? So depending on what they say, hey, they'll say, hey, that's a good question. It's structured around, financial technology, insurance, and, financial institutions. I work in financial technology. You should be like, oh, cool. I've been tracking a little bit the fintech space and what's happening in the SPAC space. I'd love to hear about a cool deal that you worked on recently. Again, you could go that route. If you don't want to go that route, if you don't have less time, you can go the route of, okay, that's awesome. Like if you only have 2 minutes, you can say, hey, I love, the fintech space you're working on. Are there other people in fintech I could speak to, or other people on the Georgetown team that you recommend me speaking to? So Richie, I would say there's no sort of end all be all answer to this question other than that try to cover those 3 or 4 topics in whatever time that you have. If you have more time, obviously come with more questions and then ask more follow-ups. Is that helpful, Richie?
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. And if you're having trouble in the next month or so or next few weeks, just ping me and we can figure out other solutions, or ping someone on my team. I'm sure we can have someone give you some suggestions. Okay, Arib, what's up?
Yeah, hey, so I'm just gonna give you a huge thank you for coming out there. It was super helpful. I just have a quick question. I'm a freshman, really interested in going into IB and kind of private equity long term after that. But I've kind of faced the fact that there's a lot of these boutique, a lot of these bulge bracket banks don't really have a ton of opportunities for freshmen. It really seems like their appetite's mainly focused on kind of sophomore years, and it makes sense. They're a lot more qualified freshmen. You really don't have a ton of experience, so I definitely kind of understand that. But would you kind of have any just recommendations for stuff to do in the summer, just to kind of get your feet wet in the industry and prove to these banks that you're really interested in the long term?
Awesome. I love the energy. Arib, I think, Anna loves it, Steven loves it. We all love it. Absolutely. All of the freshmen on this call, amazing job. You're going to have wonderful careers. I think, absolutely. I don't think you need to stress out about going and working at JP Morgan this summer or something. It's unlikely. It's not going to happen. So what's I think more likely and more beneficial for you is figure out, write down on a piece of paper tonight or tomorrow or the weekend, why are you going into banking? I think as a freshman, right, it's great to have conviction, but the one thing I worry is that you haven't explored enough of other things to sort of have the conviction around something. Sort of, again, it could be the case. I am super supportive. I'm supportive of everyone on this call, everyone at Georgetown pursuing their passions in life. That's why we created Elevate, to give you all the tools to do that. I just want to make sure that you also spend the time to figure out that is your passion, or kind of figure out along the way. So let's just say that's the case. So first step, do that. Second step, if that is finance, right? You write down all the pros and cons, you listen to a bunch of the Elevate sessions, you're like, oh my God, cool. I really want to work in private equity. Next, right? Go email the next 2 weeks, 15 PE firms in the DC area, or 15 muscle banks, and say, hey, the same energy you're showing me now, in the email, say, hey, I'm just a freshman, but I've done a lot of diligence. You can even throw out, I came to the Elevate session. I'm sure some of the firms already work with us. So you can just say, hey, we came to the session, super exciting, super inspiring. I want to work in this space. I'm part of GCI. This is why I want to work in this space. I love to kind of explore. I know I'm just a freshman, but I love to explore an opportunity for some sort of an internship this summer, if possible, right? Just go out and do it. What's the worst that can happen? They reject your email. They don't read your email. They ignore your email. If 1 out of 10 person responds, then it's 1 more than you would have gotten otherwise. So my point is, just go out and try to do it and see what happens, right? The second thing is, for a freshman and for yourself, I'll just give you one other sort of constructive criticism. I know it's hard to speak in front of X people on this call, but just work on your sort of communication skills and things that I notice, and I say some of these filler things and so on as well, but just working on those things will help your maturity level kind of come across more than a freshman, right? So my point is, a lot of our freshmen struggle with, they'll write a great email, then they'll get on the phone with someone, and then they sound like who they are, like a freshman. So I want you to come across a little bit more mature than that, so that they can say, hey, we can bring them onto our investment bank and we can trust them with this responsibility to do that, right? So that's the other thing I would say for you. So number 1, figure out for yourself the introspection. Number 2, go at it. I give you full reins to go reach out to whoever you want, everyone on this call, right? Don't be limited to being like, oh, this is an MD at a bank. Oh, well, let's see what happens, right? Try email them out and let's see what happens. So, it's funny. It reminds me, we had on like Mark Cuban and Scaramucci on our podcast, last year. And that sort of came from obviously common connections, but also sort of cold emailing people, be like, hey, we have this cool thing called Elevate. It goes to like 100 clubs and whatever. And they're like, yeah, I'd love to do it. Right. So my point is, don't set any artificial limitations for yourself. Right. It's kind of what I would say. Yeah. So that's my advice. So is that helpful?
No, that's huge. Thank you so much. Really appreciate those tips.
Of course. I thank you for asking that question and sort of, getting yourself out there. So I think we're at the end of our sort of session here. I will just end with one slide, guys. I think this is sort of important. Where is that presentation? Are there different questions as depending on level of position of the person you're talking to and networking? Yeah, I think so. Look, again, we may not have time to get through this question, but why does the person who emailed me just message me on LinkedIn, and I will sort of answer that question for you offline. But the last slide I want to end with for you guys. Again, okay, what is your LinkedIn? All right, hold on, I thought I shared it, but let me just share it again. Here, so, okay. So the last slide I'm gonna share, don't allow me to accept my message without an acceptance. Oh, sorry, okay, I will get that. Okay, so last slide I wanna share with you guys is succeeding, sort of, this is Anna's question, a little bit. I think you can, so how do you succeed as an analyst or intern? So I'll hit this really quickly. These are sort of soft skills. Number one, ensuring top quality of work. So attention to detail, footnotes, double checking, like all of these things, like your work product. No one knows you, Anna. I know Anna's awesome, but no one at her firm knows that she's awesome yet. So your quality of work will speak for itself. So try to do things like printing out your email if you're in the office, or triple checking stuff, checking your footnotes. We will all make mistakes. And trust me, I too was an intern at some point. I made a ton of mistakes. They still invited me to come back. So it's like, how do you deal with, your top quality of work? Again, it's kind of putting that extra effort behind that. Be ultra responsive. You may not even know the answer. Your VP will email you saying, hey, what's the status on this buyer? Or where's this model at? Whatever. A lot of our interns, they just sort of sit around and wait. They email their analysts and they just kind of sit around. But what you should actually do is say, hey, VP, Sarah, I got your email. I'm sort of working on it. I will get back to you as soon as there's an update. That is infinitely better than you just sitting there and sort of waiting for an answer from your analyst and not responding. So just being responsive helps. Taking ownership of something. Again, number one thing differentiates people. If interns come on and they say, hey, can I own this page in the deck? Can I own this part of the model? Obviously, you don't want to own something that you have no idea what's going on, but at least try to take ownership in things that you can actually be successful in. Communicating with clarity and precision. I hit on this earlier. Be upfront with deadlines. As an intern, week 2, week 3, you're going to be on 5 deals at the same time. So make sure everyone on every deal team knows that you're being slammed on 5 things right before deadlines hit. So just be very, very upfront in communication and tell them, hey, this other project, Project Falcon, needs me to do a model by tomorrow. You want me to do a model by tomorrow. That is not going to happen. So can you tell me how to prioritize these things, right? So just make sure you bring that stuff up early and often. Offer to help team. This is super obvious. Best way to earn sort of brownie points is just sort of, where can I help, right? Rather than saying, oh, that's just, do you need help? Just kind of saying, can I help with this? Can I do this? Can I do that? Again, that enthusiasm. Be curious. Again, when it's on that, be positive. Keep your calendar organized. Oh my God, I can't stress this enough. Day 1, you're going to have 5 emails in your mailbox. Day 4, you're going to have 500 emails in your mailbox. So just make sure you keep everything organized. So Project Falcon, sell side, buy side, clients, team, MD, like whatever folders you all need, and then put them all in there, follow-ups, whatever you need, make sure you are organizing your emails and keep them organized. Resourceful this is sort of the best intern sort of research before asking like tons of questions. Manage your time effectively, make an impact of people around you, obviously build relationships. And then last thing about your career, I'll say, hardest part about your career, guys, and I've been very lucky in my career, right, to kind of get to where I've been in the last couple of years, but trust me, the hardest part for everyone that we deal with, and we're partnered with the undergrads all the way to post MBAs, right? So the hardest part is finding the best career for you. Just because Anna is going to a career or Steven's going to a career does not mean that's the best career for you, right? So that is the hardest part in life. Your first job is not your last job. Do not fret. The career journey is not linear. You guys all know this. you don't have to solve for everything at the same time, but just try to get into the best places. Work on challenging problems that drive impact. Be prepared. I think there is sort of a quote out there, right? Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Again, be prepared for things, and when opportunity hits, you will get lucky. Networking and building relationships. I truly think we have a networking platform. A lot of Georgetown people have already been on it. We're going to open up the waitlist to more GCI. So it's called Connect. That's going to be an opportunity for you to meet all of your peers and other professionals across all of our 30 universities. It's called Connect. You will get added to it soon, hopefully when we expand the waitlist. But network capital, build your networks. That's a lifelong sort of, it's more important than actually real capital, right? So that's the other thing I'll say. And then finally, the goal in your careers is to find things that combine your skills, like what are you really good at, your interests, what are you really passionate about, and what do you define as success and impact. If you can combine those three things and find a career, you will be, amazingly successful. So I will pause there. I think we're 5 minutes over the session, but I'll turn it back over to Anna and Stephen. As always, kind of thanks for having me back. Hopefully this has been helpful for people. And one last reminder to enter that testimonial here and make sure you write that you were at Georgetown. But yeah, Anna, I'll send it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing, and the Q&A was fascinating. I learned so much as well, even for situations that don't really apply to me. It's always so good to be educated and prepared. And yeah, I mean, really appreciate your passion. And this is fantastic. Huge thank you.
Yeah, of course, guys. Thank you all so much for coming out. Look, last thing I'll say, you will all be successful. Just keep working at it, whatever your goals are. Again, this is not just, most of our people start out in banking and they go on and end up doing amazing things in life. So your career does not, just like getting into Georgetown is not the end goal, right? You know that now, even though it felt like it 3 years ago. Similarly, going and working in a certain firm is not the end goal. That's in fact the beginning of your career. So work on your relationships, work on your networks, work on yourself, and work on finding that true passion in your career as you go on. I'm sure I'll see you many more times on the Elevate stuff, but just leverage our resources. And our goal is to sort of open this up, but for yourself, don't let anyone stop you or anything stop you in sort of achieving whatever that is. But the key is to find what that is, right? So let's go on that journey together. And yeah, happy to always be back, Georgetown. Hopefully next time in the fall, we'll do this in person. But in the meantime, wish you the best of luck. If you guys run into issues and stuff, you guys should come out to the office hours, because a lot of students are using that every Friday to ask questions. Hey, no one's responding to my email. Well, how can I improve my resume? How can I improve this, whatever? And we have on real professionals every week, right? This week we have the guy from TPG and JP Morgan, but different professionals every week. And you can really ask all of these questions in a more smaller setting. So on that note, I will wish everyone best of luck. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, guys. Bye, everyone.